Jalil, Casual, thank you for coming here today. Why are we here? For freedom and liberty for ourselves personally and for Ireland. History's made by people who turned up, and you can proudly tell your children and grandchildren in 50 years from now that you turned up and you made a difference. And when our country was being flushed in the toilet, you were here standing up for freedom of speech, to be a free people in a free country. So go America. I would like to introduce Professor Gerard Casey, former Professor of Philosophy in UCD, and he will give us a rigorous philosophical takedown of this, what can only be described as Mickey Mouse legislation. Give him a bill of boss, Professor Gerard Casey.
Thank you to the organisers of this event for inviting me here today. I'm very pleased to be here to speak on free speech. I'm going to, if you forgive me, I don't normally do this, I'm going to read because the possibility of being misquoted. Can't hear.
If you come right into it, Chair.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hey, okay, how about that? Okay, that's just modesty on my part. So I apologise for reading this, but I don't want to be misquoted. So if you'll understand, I would appreciate it. Okay, first of all, so much deserves attention today, but my time is limited. I've timed this talk, it takes 9 minutes and 47 seconds. But who's counting? So I'll keep it to a few issues and be as brief as possible. I'm doing my best, okay? Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm gonna raise my voice. Okay, as best I can. All right. The hate offences bill is a threat to free speech, and that's the focus of our attention today. But before I get to that, there are some other pieces of legislation you should know about that are problematic when it comes to free speech. Buried in the Harmful Communications Act 2022 is a section that criminalises the distribution or publication of any threatening or grossly offensive communication to another person, intending by such distribution or publication to cause harm, including psychological harm. What, you might wonder, is a grossly offensive communication? Well, you'll have to look elsewhere other than the Act to find out, because the term grossly offensive isn't mentioned in the interpretation section of the Act. What a surprise. The possibility of this section being used to restrict freedom of speech should be obvious. In a Dáil debate, even Paul Murphy, not someone with whom I usually find myself in agreement, was moved to protest. The stalking bill contains a definition of stalking that includes persistently communicating by any means of communication with or about a person, attempting to make repeated unwanted contact with a person, or monitoring a person by any means. These sections open the possibility of criminalising attempts to communicate with public representatives, something obviously they don't want you to do. The gigantic Online Safety Bill 2022 establishes a commission with extraordinarily extensive powers to regulate online streaming services and broadcasters. The Commissioner will have the power to levy swingeing fines on social media services that fail to abide by the codes that the Commission draws up. Section 46 of the Act outlines a long list of specific forms of harmful content, including subsection 4, which prohibits the publication of, quote, material, images or sounds which are threatening, abusive, and this one is the good one, or insulting. And subsection 5, threatening, abusive, or insulting again, images or sounds whose broadcast is intended or, having regard to all the circumstances, is likely to stir up hatred. So it's not just the current bill, it's these other ones which are forming a circle around us and restricting our freedom to speak. Now to the bill. Just to say, by the way, before I finish on that section, Tracy O'Mahony, who's a barrister in Galway, has a very informative video on this material. You can find a link to it in a piece that I wrote and which was published on Gript yesterday, which includes a link to her video and also to 2 videos of mine. All right, now to the bill. The bill has 3 focal points: genocide, hate crime, and hate speech. I'll skip over the genocide ones simply in the interest of time, simply to say that this appears to have been the primary concern of the EU Framework Directive that the Hate Offences Bill is meant to give effect to. That leaves hate crime and hate speech. Very briefly on hate crime. We can deal with it summarily. Hate crime is something that's already a crime that's deemed to be motivated by hate. You get one tariff for the crime and another for the hate. And since hate is the thought, the hate element in hate crime is thought crime. You're being punished for what you are thinking. You are being punished for the motive with which you commit a crime. Why hate is singled out in this way is not obvious. Why not pride crime or gluttony crime or envy crime? All of these are motives for crimes, but they don't count apparently. There are at least 2 problems with hate crime. One, it gives certain groups of people special legal privileges which would seem, on the face of it, to be discriminatory, since the Constitution says, quote, all citizens shall, as human persons, be held equal before the law. It is hard to see how privileging certain named groups as categories of victims is in conformity with that provision. The second problem with hate crime is that, in fact, it's likely to be counterproductive. If people have negative attitudes towards particular groups because they think they have special privileges, whether they actually do or not, those attitudes are not likely to be dissipated by according them special legal privileges. In fact, they're going to be reinforced. The whole thing is counterproductive. I pointed this out, by the way, to the Department of Justice when I was part of a submission group back in 2019, and you can tell the effect my words have had, which is 0. By the way, it should be noted that in general, the 2002 bill doesn't require intention as the 1989 Incitement to Hatred Act does. In other words, recklessness is sufficient, and that's a much lower barrier that they have to cross. The old Act allowed the defence of intention, that, in other words, you could show that your intention couldn't be shown, or you could show that you didn't have an intention. And moreover, the new bill increases the penalties for the offence significantly. So it's a step in the wrong direction. All right, now to hate speech. Hate speech is meant to be a crime in its own right. It's really important to distinguish it from hate crime as such. The key concepts here are incitement, hatred, and violence. And again, there's really much that we could say about this. I'm only going to focus on 2 small points. The first, which I can't go into detail today, is the whole concept of incitement. Is the expression of hate necessarily incitement to hate or even to violence? And the answer clearly is no. But I suggest that that's not how this legislation will be taken. What control does an ordinary citizen have over the actions of another? In my case, none. 0. Okay. If your hate does induce another person to hate or be violent, what happens to the responsibility of those other people for what they think and do? I've got enough trouble, I don't know about you, but I've got enough trouble being responsible for what I think and what I do, and I'm sure as hell not responsible for what anybody else thinks or does. Furthermore, incitement to hate is one thing, and incitement to violence is quite another. And there is no necessary connection between the two. The Hate Offences Bill, its full title is the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill 2022. The bill covers both hatred and violence, whereas the 1989 bill covers only hatred. Why are hatred and violence bundled up together unless the point is to link hatred intrinsically to violence? There is no necessary connection. Simon Harris thinks that it's absolutely your right to say offensive things, but not to say something that incites hatred or danger towards another person. How could Mr. Harris distinguish between offensive and incitement? Shouldn't any legislation distinguish clearly between being offensive and inciting, whether to hate or to violence? And I tell you something, this legislation doesn't do that. The second problem is that the bill opens the door to unwarrantable state intrusion into the speech and communications of citizens, and that brings us to the small matter of Section 15, the one that concerns search warrants. I hadn't really looked at this section of the bill until a few days ago, and I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is one scary provision. The bill says, if a judge of the district court is satisfied by information on oath of a member, ... and then it goes on. And you say, what member? Member of what? What are you talking about? You have to go down to Section 10 to find out that they're talking about a member of An Garda Síochána. And when you do that, you discover that it refers you to the Garda Síochána Act 2005, Section 3.1. It says a member in relation to An Garda Síochána means a member of any rank. I want you to bear that in mind. A member of any rank appointed under the appropriate provisions. So putting it all together, unless there are other provisions of which I'm not aware, either in this legislation or in other legislation, it would seem that any Garda, not necessarily a senior officer, chief superintendent, not even an inspector, not even a sergeant, that any Garda can go to the district court and swear the requisite oath and apply for a search warrant. The search and seizure provisions of the 1989 Act required the swearer to be not below the rank of sergeant. By the way, just before I came out, I saw on YouTube a video of Senator Sharon Keoghan speaking about this. If you get a chance, find that video and look at it. She's able to go into it in more detail than I can do today. And if you're not horrified and scared by this, then you're not a human being. Now, the warrant can be sought under three heads, the last one of which is the most significant, and that is if the offence of preparing or possessing material likely to incite violence or hatred against persons on account of their protected characteristics. The warrant, if granted, wait for this, okay, I want you to pay attention to this. The warrant, if granted, will allow the Garda to enter by force, if necessary, a place named in the warrant, search it and any persons found at that place, examine, seize and retain anything found at that place or in possession of the persons found at that place, and compel those at the place of the search to hand over passwords to allow access to their electronic devices. I don't know if that scares you, but that scares the hell out of me. The bill does provide a defense. You can say that your material is a contribution to literary, artistic, political, scientific, religious, or academic discourse. But if you want to say this after your house has been searched, after the people in your house have been searched, after your property has been confiscated, okay, then that's scant compensation for having, as I said, your house invaded and your property and person searched. The process here is the punishment. It's preemptive punishment before you are ever determined to be guilty of an offence. Now, to adapt what one of my respondents said on Twitter, the police should police the streets and not the tweets. All right, I'm just about to finish up. Here's my conclusion. Unless the state plans to put a large number of people in jail, the bill is clearly intended to induce self-censorship, to have a chilling effect on your speech and on your thinking. Just like hate crime, the crime of hate speech is in the end all about thought crime. Remember that seminal, I don't know if you know the seminal case in the UK where Harry Miller, who was an ex-policeman, was approached by a police officer with the wonderful name Gull, PC Gull, who ended up telling him, I need to check your thinking. And that's exactly what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. They are out to check your thinking. When we put all the pieces of legislation I've mentioned together with the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred or Hate Offences Bill, it seems that in years to come, Irish citizens will be faced with formidable legal obstacles to give effect to their constitutional right to express freely their convictions and opinions. That's in the Constitution. In 2016, Leo Varadkar was of the opinion that speech should never be throttled. How art the mighty fallen, Leo? Free speech. I'm almost done. Free speech. I thought you were cheering my name there for one second. Free speech is not just for the virtuous and the wise. It is also for the vicious and the stupid. And it's even for those of us, most of us I suspect, who aren't especially virtuous or vicious or especially wise or stupid. It's for me and it's for you. In a free society, you shouldn't be obliged by law to check your thinking. And the only constraints in your communications should be the operations of social norms that well-mannered persons have assimilated through their upbringing. Some have suggested that this bill might be redrafted. I hope I won't be thought guilty of incitement to hatred or violence if I suggest that the only kind of redrafting for which this bill is suitable involves a fireplace and some matches. Thank you.
Hey. Thank you.